What's going on, people? Happy Friday night. It's really late, isn't it? I wanted to get this out a little bit earlier, but I am the slowest writer in the world. I've got a banger that's coming out this weekend for 710sports.com, and I'm going to discuss some of the content of that in a little bit. Hope that you guys are all doing well. It's a cold, rainy Friday night here in Seattle. I plan on a little bit later, possibly playing a little Call of Duty Warzone. Still got to figure out how to actually be able to stream all of that. I believe I need to buy some sort of expensive piece of equipment to actually hook things up to my home office right here. Obviously, the Iron Throne. That's where I work. Get used to it, deal with it. And at some point, we'll do that. I would like to optimally do these at about, like 11 o'clock or 12 Pacific time on Fridays after the show is done. We'll try to get these done every single week. There have been some, slight procrastinations, and I say slight, like extreme procrastinations on my part. Let's start off, before we get into your questions, with the biggest news of the day. And this, amazingly, once again, features someone leaving Houston for Seattle. First it was Jadeveon Clowney. Then it was me. Now, former Texan Carlos Hyde, running back for them, ran for 1,070 yards last season, a 4.4 yards per carry average, has signed with the Seattle Seahawks. And there are people here who I know are frustrated with the move because you feel that this is something that is going to hurt their ability to bring back Jadeveon Clowney. It might, and I'm a little bit more skeptical and pessimistic about the idea of Jadeveon Clowney returning. But here's something that you got to remember. You can always create cap space in the NFL. Always. And with that in mind, if the Seahawks really want to bring in Jadeveon Clowney, there are guys they can part ways with to make the necessary space. It might involve a couple of difficult decisions, but right now I think that you continue to play the waiting game and you hope that Clowney's asking price goes down. I am still of the belief that we will be returning to some sense of normalcy, and by normalcy I mean actually having American sports leagues in action before Jadeveon Clowney decides on where he ends up playing next. Whether that's Houston or, that's not happening. Whether it's Tennessee or Seattle or somewhere else. But I want to focus on Carlos Hyde tonight. For those people who are following me from me being at 710 ESPN Seattle and covering the Seahawks, you're probably a little frustrated about Carlos Hyde signing. Also because you are of the mindset that Russell Wilson needs to cook. And remember, when I first came here, I felt the same way. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, yeah, Rashad Penny is coming off of a knee injury and he might be on the PUP list to open the season, but the Seahawks still have Chris Carson. They drafted DJ Dallas, and they also still have Travis Homer aboard. Here's the deal. You guys are really being optimistic about Chris Carson's recovery, and I would like to be. And I really like him as a running back. I think he's a very skilled player, and had he not torn his ACL in high school, I think that he would have been a much higher draft pick, and he wouldn't have been able to fall to the Seahawks where he did. Because if you hear Pete Carroll and John Schneider talking about that draft when they finally were able to get Chris Carson, they tell you that they really were itchy to pull the finger on the trigger to bring him aboard as that draft continued to progress. But Carson's coming off of a hip injury, and he had hip issues in 2018, not just in 2019, this past season, which ended his year. So you're talking about a guy that's coming off of a pretty serious injury. And look, he might be able to recover from it, but there's always a chance that you don't. And I would specifically point at Seahawks safety Lano Hill. I did not watch a lot of Lano Hill before I got here. All I know is that watching him trying to track down Kenyon Drake in that late Seahawks-Cardinals game was very much akin to watching Ziggy Ansah try to bring down Josh McCown in the playoffs. It was slow, and it didn't look very good. So, and as Steven points out on Periscope, Carson's never finished the season healthy. I am of the belief that if the Seahawks had one more good running back at the end of last year when they had that just extreme rash of bad luck with Carson getting hurt and Penny getting hurt, that they would have beaten the Green Bay Packers. They decided to go into that game against the Packers with the idea, we're going to run the football. And I think it was the right strategy from this perspective. The 49ers, the very next week, ran the ball down Green Bay's throats, and the Packers never had an answer for it. So that was the right strategy. I think you want to attack the weaknesses of a defense, and clearly that was the weakness of the Packers defense. The problem was Marshawn Lynch was not the Marshawn Lynch that they were hoping for. And it's nothing against Marshawn Lynch at this point in his career, but this was a guy that had not played all season long, who a little bit earlier, I think for the last game that had been played at the Oakland Coliseum for the Oakland Raiders, was like ripping tequila shots in the parking lot. There's nothing against him, but he wasn't the same player, and you shouldn't have expected him to be the same player. And I hope that the Seahawks didn't. But they stuck with Marshawn Lynch too long in that game, and he just didn't have it. But say they had somebody else in addition to Chris Carson and Rashad Penny, like a Carlos Hyde. They win that game, period. And Carlos Hyde is the exact kind of running back that the Seahawks want. North-south, fits in very well with Brian Schottenheimer's wanting to establish the run. And I know, you want to pass the football too. But the Seahawks are at their best when they can be balanced. And I think that you want to have that weapon for Russell Wilson of an actually legitimate running game behind him so that he can continue to do the things that he does best, which is throw balls deep down the field off the play-action fake. For Carlos Hyde's contract, he could earn as much as $4 million this coming season, which is surprising. He made $2.8 million last year. That was his contract that he signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. Pretty surprising considering he ran for 1,000 plus for the first time in his career, that he's only going to sign for a contract that can earn him as much as $4 million, especially from what I've heard. The Texans offered him a 2-year deal that was worth about like $5 million a year. I guess there was not a lot of guaranteed money or something like that. But, I mean, he ran for 1,070 yards last season and averaged 4.4 yards a carry. I like him. I think he runs with authority. He runs with power. He's not going to bring much to the table in the passing game. I know he had a bunch of receptions in San Francisco a couple of seasons ago, but don't expect much out of him in the passing game. I think that's going to be DJ Dallas, who will get some shots at that early on in the season, assuming Chris Carson maybe takes a little bit slower to get going. That'll be very interesting to see. He's a rookie running back, and who knows if he'll be able to pick things up as quickly as you would optimally like, given that obviously this offseason has been very much changed by COVID-19. But we'll see on that front. I like the move. I really do. I think all the people, the militant Hawks 12s who are out there and are freaking out about the Seahawks not signing Clowney and all that, calm down. Seriously, calm down. This helps them out a lot. It limits the cap space a little bit, but they needed another running back. You can't go into this season thinking that Chris Carson is going to be 100%. You just can't. You got to think worst case scenario here. And the worst case scenario is that he's not ready to go. Steven says, do you know that analytics do not agree with you? Yes, I do. I don't care about analytics in this sense. I think that running backs do matter. Carlos Hyde's a former second-round pick. I retweeted something the other day, Gallant says on Twitter, that showed a highlight montage of what Josh Jacobs did this past season. He was a first-round pick, and I liked him a lot. We got to meet him when I was still doing the show on 610 in Houston with Seth Payne and Mike Meltzer. Josh Jacobs joined us on Radio Row in Atlanta, and I thought he was remarkably frank. I thought it was interesting the way that he talked about the national championship game and how he thought Alabama just didn't have it for that game. Very frank, but there's a highlight montage of him on Twitter. The guy's a first-round pick. He looks like a first-round pick. Running back talent matters. They are not interchangeable. That is a load of crap. Anyone who is going to try to push you that, and I know a lot of the analytical types on Twitter that follow the Seahawks do that. I'm sorry, they're just wrong. Running backs have a variety of different skill levels, and you want to have one who is towards the top. Carlos Hyde, he's towards the top as far as being a power running back, and that's somebody that I really, really would like to see continue his career here in Seattle, and that's what we're going to see. All right. At this point, and I need to figure out how I can take a look at every single question that I got. Where is the... Okay, well, this is, once again, this is only like the second time I'm doing this, and I am not able to find my little Restream chat window, so I am loading that currently. Once that is pulled up, I'll be able to actually access all of your questions. Bad job by me not having that. Okay, so let's take a look at something else really quickly. Have you guys been paying attention to this Quinton Dunbar situation? It is something else, isn't it? And I'm most intrigued by the way that the lawyers in this situation have been acting. They've been acting like children. And it's been hilarious. And I know there was a robbery that took place. Quinton Dunbar might have been involved. He might not have. I don't know if we're ever going to find the truth to it. But this dice game features that spawned an amazing back and forth between two lawyers. And first off, I want to focus on Michael Grieco, who is the lawyer for Quinton Dunbar. This guy is about as shady gets. This is someone who ran for mayor in Miami Beach in 2017. And he got into some controversial tactics. The Miami Herald began investigating him for taking a donation from a foreign national. And this guy, he is quite the character. When confronted by the newspaper, said, "It is absolutely untrue. You can look into my soul." Imagine a lawyer saying that. And what's funny is when I think the Miami Herald continued to look into his soul, what they found was that, yeah, he had indeed been illegally taking donations from a foreign national. So then he stopped running for mayor the next month. And then he resigned in October. And then he cut a deal that barred him from public office for a year. He's got a shady track record. I'm going to link a Miami Herald article later, and that's what my piece on 710 Sports is about. That's going to come up, I believe, on Sunday morning. It's about this character. When he was on John Clayton's show earlier this week, he said some of the same sort of bombastic, ridiculous quotes. Like he was humble bragging about having 5 smoking guns that were in Quinton Dunbar's favor. And when Clayton asked him about the sworn affidavits that had seen, if I'm not mistaken, 4 guys that alleged that Dunbar was involved in this robbery at a dice game, all of a sudden, 5 of them changed their affidavits and said that Dunbar was not involved at all. A little suspicious, right? No matter how much you want to give Quinton Dunbar the benefit of the doubt, come on, that's something else. But if you take a look at what he had to say on Clayton's show, it's not just the 5 smoking guns humble brag. He also said, when asked about those witnesses, "I'm not going to speak to the type of people they are," and then 5 seconds later said they were scam artists. Yeah, they came off that way. It was something else. He's been described, this Grieco character, by those who saw him in Miami politics as, quote, someone to be afraid of, a destructive personality, someone who thought he was above the law, and he has been described as Fredo from The Godfather, which probably means that he's not the most intelligent chap. He's a shameless self-promoter, and I just think that the guy's hilarious, even if the case isn't hilarious. What else do we have here on this front? It's not just Quinton Dunbar's lawyer that's hilarious. You've also got Patrick Patel, who is the lawyer for DeAndre Baker, the Giants' former first-round pick that was supposedly with Quinton Dunbar at this game of dice. I didn't know that the defense of "ignore that rattin', my client was playing Madden," sort of rhymes, working title, actually existed, but that is what Patrick Patel is alleging. He is saying that DeAndre Baker brought his Xbox over to this cookout and this game of cards and dice, and he locked himself in a room. And while he was locked in the room, he was just playing Madden. He heard a bunch of gunshots, or not gunshots, I guess commotion. He left, and when he left, he just left his Xbox there. Imagine being that rich. You can just leave your Xbox somewhere. I thought that was a pretty funny defense. It might actually be true, but imagine like you saying, "Yeah, I was playing Xbox. I wasn't part of the robbery." That's an interesting alibi. He's really mad at Michael Grieco, and he is actually, it seems, going to sue Grieco for libel against DeAndre Baker because Grieco put up this screenshot of a direct message on Twitter, and the direct message on Twitter essentially said something along the lines of, hang on, what did it say? It said that there was a person who had been playing, I guess, in a game of craps with DeAndre Baker earlier in the week, and it was a picture of them playing, and it claimed that they had won a bunch of money off of DeAndre Baker. So basically it gives Dunbar an alibi that he wasn't at this game that gave DeAndre Baker possibly a motive to rob these people at this game of dice for whatever amount of money it was. I think like $70,000. So you have that. And then at the same time, it gives that motive for DeAndre Baker. So he's ticked off about it. Look, I got to be honest. I don't trust Quinton Dunbar's lawyer, Michael Grieco, at all. And again, check out the piece, 710sports.com on Sunday. You'll see why. You'll be able to read why. It's a fascinating piece. So I don't really know that we're going to be able to say that Quinton Dunbar was totally innocent here. And because of that, I feel like the NFL is going to hand out a suspension, which is a bummer. I wonder how much of a suspension it is. And look, if he did something bad, it's a bad look, obviously, and it's a bad thing to do. And he should know better, 27 years old, hanging out with people like that. I mean, he's a professional, and he just got a job in a new place. He is looking to get a long-term contract extension. The only way he gets that is if he plays, and if he plays well. And given with the way Jaron Reed played last season after starting the year with a 6-game suspension, it stands within reason that we want Dunbar to start the year and not have any sort of suspension that's going to potentially hamstring his ability to get off to a good start, or maybe make it easy for Trey Flowers, who I thought had some good moments last year to win that starting gig. So I'm looking at Dunbar right now, and I'm wondering if the NFL suspends him, and if that happens, it's going to be unfortunate, but he put himself in the wrong place at the wrong time and hung out with the wrong people. All right, it's Ask Gallant Anything. You can ask me any question. I'm sorry I'm not able to scroll up for a little bit further with the restream chat because I did not launch the chat window until about 5 minutes ago. But you can ask me any question, and I'll try to answer it as best I can. Steven asks, can you name a top-end running back on a Super Bowl winning team since Lynch? That is a good point, and I know that he is one of those analytical types. So you know what? I'm going to have to take a look right here on Google. But what I can tell you is this. Did you watch the playoffs this past season? Derrick Henry and got Ryan Tannehill to an AFC championship game. And for a moment, Tennessee hung around in that game against Kansas City for a while. The San Francisco 49ers, did they have a top-end running back on their team? No, but they had a stable of running backs that won them the NFC championship game. If you have Carlos Hyde on the Seahawks, you're giving yourself the same kind of deal. Look, I get it. Chris Carson is the one that you want to have out there for the most part, but Carson, Penny, Carlos Hyde, it's the best running back core in the NFL if all of those guys are healthy. Penny played well last year. He averaged 5 yards a carry. So I understand what you're saying. Can you name a top-end running back on a Super Bowl winning team since Marshawn Lynch? And I'm going to have to actually go back and maybe check on that before conversations next week because right now my phone is not operating in the way that I would like it to, so I can't look that up. But given the way these playoffs played out this past season and the regular season played out this past season, the running game is coming back. Physical running games are coming back. And that's what Carlos Hyde brings to the table. Leaf Leafson says, sketchy lawyers are what you want in your corner. I suppose. You want connected lawyers. That's for sure. Ulrich says that Dunbar's lawyer seems sketchy as hell and gives me doubt that he did no wrong. That's the unfortunate part of this whole thing. Because, I mean, how do you go from a couple of people testifying that Dunbar was holding a gun to all of a sudden 5 people that had apparently had testified within 36 hours changing their testimony? Helps Dunbar out a lot, that's for damn sure. But if we're talking about if Dunbar did nothing, that's going to be difficult. Brent McKinney says, I wouldn't trust the Miami Herald as far as I could throw them. Okay, but you're going to trust this guy over the Miami Herald? Seriously, you got to do some research on him. Steven, better yet, do you think Brady has won any of his rings with the Hall of Fame running back? Yes, Corey Dillon, because Corey Dillon's a borderline Hall of Fame running back. And if you take a look at the first 3 Super Bowl victories that the New England Patriots had, that running game was a big part of it. In fact, I would also take a look at this last Super Bowl that Tom Brady won. The running game is the reason that they were able to do some of the things that they were against the Los Angeles Rams and in the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs. Brady did not play great in that game, no matter what New England Patriot fans will want to tell you. Looking at the other questions, trying to speak English, not doing it so well. Brent McKinney says, innocent until proven guilty. And, you know, that's a funny thing, and we talked about that earlier this week on Danny and Gallant, the idea of being innocent before proven guilty. It sucks that it's not actually true, it's at least in the court of public opinion. In legal courts, yes, absolutely. It's the foundation of our legal system. But the court of public opinion, it never works out that way. And here's the other sad reality of our court system. If you have money, you're going to have ridiculous resources that can beat a state government and a federal government. And that is what Quinton Dunbar likely has right now. That is what DeAndre Baker likely has right now. We'll see how both of those cases play out, of course. Samra Samuel, my guy. Come back to Houston, Paul. I will be back visiting at some point soon. I'm not 100% sure when, because for those who don't know, I was in Houston for like the last 8 years. I love Houston. I love the people. I miss it. I can't believe that I think next week, a little bit more than a week from now, I will officially have been not working at Sports Radio 610 there for a year. Time has flown by. And I mean, shoot, time has flown by here. I came here in October. It feels like it was just yesterday when I first moved here and got all this stuff into this office. What else do we have here? Nick Ulrich. Ooh. Would you rather have Greg Olsen and Carlos Hyde or Jadeveon Clowney? I think we asked some variant of this question on Danny and Gallant. I forget who the other person we said. Was it Greg Olsen and Bruce Irvin? Yeah, I think it was Greg Olsen and Bruce Irvin. Well, if Will Dissly's healthy, and if Chris Carson's healthy, a lot of ifs. Such a big word for only 2 letters. Then, I mean, you have a pretty good offense. With Olsen and Hyde, your offense has a lot of depth. I'm a big Jadeveon Clowney truther. I would rather have Jadeveon Clowney. I think a lot of people feel the same way. You saw how good he was. I know that there are some injury concerns, but I mean, considering the guys that they added this offseason, you draft Darrell Taylor, you bring in Bruce Irvin, you bring in Benson Mayowa, those two, the latter two, Mayowa and Irvin had 15.5 sacks this past season. The pass rush should be better, and you hope that LJ Collier is just, I don't know, to be polite, better, and you hope that Rasheem Green can take a step forward too, and you hope that Jaron Reed's just better than he was last year. Jaron Reed was a huge disappointment. I mean, Jadeveon Clowney's drawing double teams and triple teams. Jaron Reed couldn't take advantage of that. I thought after 6 games when he came back that we were going to see the guy that had played so well the year before. I don't know what the heck happened, but that was a major disappointment to me. I thought Jaron Reed was better than what he was, and yikes, it did not go so well for him. Scuba doop doo, shibbly dee doop doo doo wop. Steven. So running backs do matter, or the offensive system. Todd Gurley looked real good prior to Sean McVay. Sean McVay is I think a smart coach, but that offense, that Rams offense, was all about Todd Gurley. I mean, they brought in a running back, Darrell Henderson. They brought in Cam Akers this offseason from Florida State. That Rams offense, I don't think it's going to ever be back to the degree that it was. It's because they had Gurley. It's not that Gurley was just an incredible running back. It's that Gurley was one of the best pass-catching running backs in the NFL. That's why I think Christian McCaffrey was worth that contract that he got. I know a lot of people will disagree with me on that front, but what happened to Gurley was was a freak accident. And maybe the Rams could have been a little bit, in hindsight, wary of the fact that Gurley had had injuries on his knee before. But he was the reason that offense worked. I think an offensive system like Kyle Shanahan's does get more out of running backs than the average system. But I do think that having a talented running back, it's like the most important thing for a running game, especially if that guy can stay on the field for passing downs. You have Dalvin Cook who can do that in Minnesota. You have Todd Gurley who can do that. Well, check that. Todd Gurley can't do that anymore. What am I talking about? You have Ezekiel Elliott. You have Saquon Barkley. You have Christian McCaffrey. Those guys are transcendent. And that's why when you draft a running back really early on in a draft, it makes sense if the guy's good enough. Maybe it hasn't worked out so well for a Leonard Fournette in terms of sheer volume usage that he has had in Jacksonville. I think that they would say at the very least that they've gotten the most bang for their buck that they possibly could. But I think they would prefer to have Deshaun Watson or Patrick Mahomes. What else do we got here? Possibly Tyreek Hill considered top 5. Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about as far as top 5. Mike Jones. If you could go back in time, would you kill Hitler or COVID-19 or Bill O'Brien? I know you guys don't like Bill O'Brien. There are some memories that I have of Bill O'Brien that I actually enjoy. I don't think he's the worst coach in the NFL. I do think some of his general managing decisions have been disastrous. Hitler or COVID-19? Hitler. Hitler murdered people. COVID-19, look, it's a virus. It's awful. It is terrible. And right now, Washington, as a state, has been largely shut down by it We have no idea when we're going to have a vaccine for it. We have no idea when we're going to, what else? What else do we know? I don't know when anything's going to change, at least as far as on Washington's front. You know, like I don't even know when sports are going to be back. I'm hoping that they're going to be back soon. I'm hoping that we have regular testing available, but it seems like that's a long way off as well. But I mean, you have the opportunity to stop a mass murderer. Hitler was the worst, and I mean, just think about this. And this is one of the things that drives me nuts about history. You know, I joke every now and then about the British who seem to be mildly concerned about imperialism now. Well, they weren't concerned about imperialism until we got into World War II, because we made them stop it. And they weren't concerned about German imperialism either in World War II. I mean, Neville Chamberlain, who was the person who was in charge of England at the time, just continued to let Hitler do whatever the hell he wanted. And eventually, like, Winston Churchill stepped in and he's like, dude, you keep on doing this. What do you think's going to happen? Ray says, I miss you. I miss you too, Ray. Nathan Underhill, do you think the Seahawks should get more depth at defensive tackle? I wanted them to get more depth at defensive tackle in the draft. You got Poona Ford. You have Jaron Reed. After that, what do you really have at that position? Not a lot. I was surprised that they didn't draft one at defensive tackle. Yes, I would like to see them get more depth there. That's something that could possibly happen with late roster cuts that take place during training camp, after training camp, and during the preseason. What else do we have here? Steven, how have those guys done in the playoffs, the running backs that I listed? Well, think about this. Christian McCaffrey was stuck with two just crap quarterbacks last year. I mean, Kyle Allen stinks. He threw 3 interceptions to Seahawks linebackers. The same Seahawks linebackers that like had a tough time covering anybody. Linebackers. It's not Christian McCaffrey's fault. And look, a running back alone is not going to win you things. But a running back plus an average quarterback, like Todd Gurley plus a Jared Goff, that's going to get you places. A solid running back core plus Jimmy Garoppolo, that got the 49ers to a Super Bowl. You still need to have like a somewhat decent quarterback, but if you have a great running back, I mean, that changes things. And I do think that if the Panthers can find their way into a competent quarterback, I don't think it's going to be Teddy Bridgewater. Having Christian McCaffrey is going to be a huge boon for that guy. Brian Jackson, this is the last question I'm going to answer. Do you think there is going to be a story talked about this year more than Tampa Bay in the NFL? I do think that this is the first year in a long time, and I know that we could say this for every single season with the Patriots, but it's the first time in a long time that there is a team that won the Super Bowl last year that I feel very strongly is going to win this year's Super Bowl. Kansas City, that offense, it's not stoppable. And barring injuries to guys like Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, I just don't see anyone stopping them in the AFC. I mean, I don't think it's going to be Baltimore. And I don't really see anyone stopping them in the NFC either. And I know that the 49ers, for the most part, did a pretty good job defensively against Kansas City. All it took was like 5 minutes. And that 10-point lead or whatever multiple score lead that the 49ers had on the Chiefs, gone. One last question. Is a hot dog a sandwich? A hot dog sucks. Hot dogs are the worst. Oh, Paul, what are you talking about? That's un-American. No, seriously, hot dogs aren't good. Especially when you microwave them. Like, you got to burn them to make them taste good. Ugh, come on. It's not a sandwich. It's something you shouldn't eat. Get a hamburger. Hell, get bratwurst or something like that. It's hot dogs. There's such a variance in terms of what's good and what's bad, but for the most part, it's bad. So that's your hot take of the day. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope that you're having a great Friday. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Wash your butts. We'll be back doing this next Friday again. I will have the chat up at first so I can see the questions that were asked early on. I'm sorry about that I wasn't able to answer those first questions. I appreciate you tuning in. For those who don't know, because I know you guys are all over all sorts of platforms, on Facebook, my Facebook page, give it a like, facebook.com/PaulGallantSports. I'm also on Twitter, @GallantSays. I'm on Twitch, I believe it's also @GallantSays on that. I should probably know this by now. And on my YouTube channel, it is also, search for Paul Gallant on YouTube. You're going to see a little Gallant Says cover photo. I'm trying to put more YouTube content out there. And the next thing that we'll have out there likely will have something to do with some of the players that the Seahawks have drafted. I'm trying to watch them slowly. It takes time, and I'll be honest, I'm just a procrastinator. Not good on that front. But have a great Friday night. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. For any of those who have family that served in the armed forces and gave their lives for this country, who gave their lives in combat, who died in combat, my thoughts are with you. And anyone who's brave enough to put their life on the line for something greater than themselves, I have so much respect for that. And as someone who is a part of a family that had a lot of people serve in the armed forces, I have a tremendous amount of respect for everyone who has served our country, and especially for those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice for our country. So anyway, yeah, have a great weekend, everybody. I've said that like 5 times. I'm really bad at concluding these things, and we will talk